Today's News Talk Radio.
Come on, let the man talk.
We never censor our hosts.
Good. Now, talk.
Uncensored news.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back, folks. We're in hour number 2 of this live broadcast. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host, and I want to welcome onto the program a guest who's been on the program before. He's also the editor of Palestine Nexus. We'll drop that URL down in the Chiron. Dr. Zachary Foster is joining us right now, live from Mexico City. Zach, thank you very much for coming with us this week. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of the events of, let's just say, the events of the last 7 days? Zachary, I want to get your reaction on this because a lot of people are saying that the board, the playing field in the Middle East has been reset as of last Friday, April 14th. An extraordinary event. A lot of people didn't think it was going to happen, couldn't even conceive of it happening, and it happened. What does it mean? How significant is this?
So on April 1st, the Israeli military targeted the Iranian consulate in Syria, in Damascus. They attacked Iranian soil, in other words, which is obviously a grave breach of international law. Iran, according to the UN Charter, has a right to act in self-defense, and that's exactly what they did by firing a number of ballistic missiles as well as drones just this past weekend. I think it was Saturday. And I think there are a few noteworthy things to say about that counterattack. Number one, it's very clear they were going after military targets that may be strange to the state of Israel and the Israeli military, which doesn't seem to care whether or not their targets are civilian infrastructure or high-rise apartments or military targets. All of the above are perfectly legitimate targets to the state of Israel. By contrast, Iran clearly was going after a military base in the south. That was a military base from which the Israeli army targeted the Iranian consulate in Damascus. So in that sense, you could say this was quite a legitimate attack against the Israeli military. There were, I believe, there was no loss of life, if I'm not wrong. I think there was one injury in the attack. But I mean, in comparison to the attack against the Iranian consulate in Damascus, which I believe resulted in, I can't recall if the latest casualty figures were 12 or 16, but we're talking about many casualties, including, I mean, we're talking about you're targeting a diplomatic target. Right, you're targeting a consulate. So I think when and on top of all that, Iran telegraphed the attack. For days in advance, they warned the U.S., we are going to launch a counterstrike. And they said in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter. And they gave Israel forewarning. They launched these drones that take hours and hours to reach their final destination. It was a made-for-TV affair. So I think when you consider all that, it's very clear that this was probably certainly proportional in the sense that it was going after military targets, in the sense that there was no loss of life, and in the sense that they telegraphed it. So all things considered, I think what they were telling the world was, we don't want this to escalate any further. We don't want this to result in civilian casualties. We are going after a military target. We want this to be considered a proportional attack. And for those reasons, I think it was a quite justified counterstrike.
And I think that telegraphing was extraordinary. I mean, I almost felt like they were bluffing, Zachary, because it's just, I've never seen a country attack Israel directly. It just, that has not happened since, I guess the Yom Kippur war, in a military fashion, directly locking horns with Israel. So I didn't know if that was going to happen. But then I was thinking, imagine if they're telegraphing this, then surely they're talking to the United States directly, because they'll have to inform them of what targets they're intending to hit, and that give Washington certain assurances, because the last thing Iran would want, Zachary, is for the United States to get the wrong idea in mid-flight, or it's some kind of miscommunication that could spiral out of control and just be really, and then tragically for Iran and probably a few other people as well. So that communication is extraordinary, because that means that the U.S. is talking directly to Iran. And this is the sort of thing they would do with the Soviet Union or other superpowers. So does this indicate that Iran has stepped up in terms of its, place in the hierarchy of West Asia? What are your thoughts?
I think there's no question that Iran was signaling to both Israel and the West that we will not tolerate attacks on our own soil, and they signaled that in a number of ways. First of all, they they obviously told everyone in advance that they were going to make this counterstrike, but they also made the counterstrike from Iranian territory, and that is very important because if you recall, in the weeks prior to the counterstrike, Israel said we would consider any attack from Iranian soil to be an escalation, and Iran said no, that's not how it works. You don't get to dictate the terms of what a counterstrike. What kind of counterstrike could be considered escalatory and what kind of counterstrike would be considered proportional? That's for us to decide. And so I think in that sense, Iran was dictating the terms of their agreement, of the counterstrike, and basically saying, we call the shots here. We don't take orders from the Israeli military. And that was significant. Beyond that, I think what Iran is saying is we have the capability to strike you in ways that will be absolutely devastating. And because recall, they only sent a few dozen ballistic missiles, right? Those are the missiles that do not take hours to reach Israeli territory. They can reach Israeli territory in minutes, and they can cause major damage. And so I think by only sending a few, they could have sent hundreds of ballistic missiles. They did not. And they could have sent hundreds of ballistic missiles targeting Israeli civilian population centers, giving Israel a little bit of taste of its own medicine. Of course, they didn't do that. I mean, God hopes they wouldn't do that. That would be catastrophic, not just for Iran, not just for Israel, but for the entire world. So, but no question about it. Iran was basically, I think, not only counter-striking in a very proportional way, but also at the same time signaling to Israel and the West, don't mess with us.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. It was very clear, and as well, they said if Israel retaliates against our strike, we will hit back 10 times harder. And what do you think about what happened last night? I mean, a lot of people are still processing this. I'm kind of sifting through information. I see some conflicting reports of what actually happened. It didn't look like much of a counterstrike by Israel, if any. And some Iranian sources are saying it wasn't. It was something that happened internally, maybe an internal terrorist attack attempt, maybe an Israeli or an American proxy. What do you think happened last night, Zachary?
Yeah, so I haven't been following the reporting as close as I really should have to really say anything with confidence. But what I can say is that clearly, what is clear, what I can say with confidence is that the Israeli political leadership is between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, you have a cabinet full of fascists, warmongers, Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu is on the left side. He would be considered a lefty in the cabinet. I mean, just imagine. But basically, that is what we are dealing with. Israel Katz, you're talking about an entire cabinet full of warmongers and genocidal maniacs. Honestly, is what they all are. And so they want to project this image of toughness to their voting public. And they promised. I mean, there was a report that came out. I think some information was leaked by someone who was in the cabinet meetings that said if the Israeli public was listening to these cabinet meetings, 4 million Israelis would be on their way to Ben Gurion Airport and getting the heck out of the country. If that gives you a sense of just how crazy warmongering these Israeli cabinet ministers are. So clearly that's their nature. That is their desire. And that was clearly what they wanted to do. But at the same time, you have messages coming out of the Biden administration telling the Israeli political leadership, we will not back a counterstrike. And so clearly they knew that if they were going to strike against Iran without U.S. support, they would be in trouble. Because they're already in trouble with the Biden administration. At least there's signals that Biden is now applying much more pressure than he has in the past on forcing Israel to open up the borders to allow more humanitarian aid in. And so clearly, this Israeli administration is clearly caught offsides and doesn't know what to do. And so it doesn't surprise me that the reporting coming out over the past 24 hours is sort of all over the place. Who even fired this missile or missiles? Isfahan? Was it from inside Iran? Honestly, it's been quite unclear to me as well.
What all this does signify, which is interesting, Zachary, I want to get your thoughts on this, is that, there's always this impression that Israel's the tail that wags the dog, the American dog of the American empire, that has a disproportionate influence over American politics with IPAC, with the lobby. All of this is true and accepted. But in terms of like when it really comes down to the crunch, in other words, when it becomes like we're staring at the abyss of World War III and the United States has to then prioritize. And what we've seen was when it comes to the edge of the cliff, that it's not the tail wagging the dog, it's the dog wagging the tail. Because the final say, the power is still, is actually in Washington when it comes to everything that Israel can do. It can do pretty much nothing. It can't defend itself without Washington. It can't counterattack without Washington. It can't do anything without getting clearance on so many different fronts. So that's one of the main takeaways of the last week. And I think that's quite an extraordinary thing because it's really shattered this kind of air of illusion that a lot of people have been operating in, the mystique and the assumption that Israel somehow is a regional power. But it doesn't look like it actually is now. That's the feeling. It's still a formidable issue and a problem, and they have a powerful military. They have nukes, but they're not the preeminent regional power. I think that's something it seems to be hitting home at the moment. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely correct. For many months, there was this perception that the Biden administration tried to give off that they're doing their best. They're applying as much pressure as they possibly can, but ultimately, Israel's a sovereign state. They make their own decisions, right? That we're doing our best behind closed doors to apply as much pressure as possible, but ultimately, they call the shots. I think what we've discovered over the past week and a half, 2 weeks, is that narrative is false. Is that it took one phone call. It was not 2 phone calls. It was 1 phone call that Biden made, and it was only after there was an Israeli strike on an aid convoy of 7 Westerners. It took 7 white people to die in the Gaza Strip. Was it an Australian, a couple Brits, an American, whoever else, a Polish citizen or 2, right? So basically, it took the deaths of 7, non-Palestinians, aid workers in the Gaza Strip, for Biden to pick up the phone and say, our relationship with the state of Israel will now be a function of how much aid gets into Gaza. And then immediately you saw, Israel basically the next day, all of a sudden bakeries are opening up in North Gaza. Well, why were they closed? And why did they open up the day after Biden makes his statement? Well, it's obvious. It's because obviously Biden does have the ability to apply as much pressure as he wants to the state of Israel. He could have said, that $14 billion we said we were going to give you in this aid package that is going through the U.S. Congress right now? Guess what? We're canceling that. Oh, by the way, you know how much money we give you every year? $3.8 billion. Oh, guess what? We're going to stop giving you that as well. Oh, do you know how we keep vetoing every UN resolution for a ceasefire? Oh, guess what? We're going to stop vetoing those resolutions. If Biden said all of that tomorrow, there would be a sea change in the Israeli attitude. There would be a sea change in how much humanitarian aid gets into Gaza. There would be a complete reversal because it's U.S. bombs that are falling in Gaza every day. Israel doesn't produce the amount of ammunition and 1,000 and 2,000 pound bombs. They don't have they need restocks every single week or two. Basically, the United States on a weekly basis is restocking the Israeli army. They don't have the supplies, the weapons, the shipments to be able to bomb Gaza the way they have been. They're fundamentally dependent on U.S. aid just to be able to carry out their operations, let alone at a higher level, the diplomatic support and just the broader diplomatic coverage that they get from the United States. So I think we've learned that the entire mantra of the Biden administration for its first 5-6 months of this genocidal war being waged on Gaza was all a fiction. It was all smokescreen. And in fact, Biden actually doesn't want, it was actually just him not wanting to apply any pressure in Israel, that was the real truth of the matter for the past 5-6 months.
Yeah, the illusion in the U.S. media that they've managed to maintain is that Israel is an independent actor. It's acting on its own volition. The United States is there as a kind of friendly guiding hand, there to support poor little Israel when it is being ganged up on by its evil Arab neighbors. That's the sort of general consensus illusion with Israel. And the reality is that it's not independent. It's completely dependent on the United States and also on European partners as well. So without their political support, without their material support, it could not do anything that it's doing. It could not have a sustained campaign against Gaza. All of that stuff would be falling by the wayside. They'd be forced to go to the peace negotiations table after a week, let alone a couple of months. So that's the reality of the situation there. So I am happy to see some of these things appearing, some of these cracks, these fissures. Now, what do you think about the recent announcement by Netanyahu about the multi-billion-dollar investment in settlements? This is, again, a provocation. When I saw him make that statement, in my mind, I transposed Ariel Sharon over Netanyahu, and it just reminded me of that Bolshevik provocation that intended to kind of stick the knife in and twist it once again to the Palestinian people and to show the international community, basically to give them the finger, is basically what he was doing there. Did he do you think that was a result of some kind of a deal with Washington to, I don't know, for Israel to show restraint and not attack Iran? Or do you think there's these sort of games going on in the background?
Yeah, we did see some reporting. I believe it was an Arabic newspaper out of the Gulf. Was it? I can't remember which one now. Yeah, we could pull up the source, but basically there was some reporting just this past weekend that in exchange for Israel not retaliating against Iran, that they would get to invade Rafah, right? That yes. I'm not entirely sure how accurate that reporting is.
That was in the Israeli press. That was in Israeli, multiple Israeli outlets reported this as well. So again, we don't have maybe the provenance of that claim, but it has been reported in both the Israeli and the Arab press.
Yeah, so if that's true, I mean, that is a remarkable development. Israel is leveraging its ability to not engage in a regional war, to not spark a regional war, which could easily become a global war. I mean, literally, the argument that Israel making is, we won't start World War III if you let us continue carrying out a genocide in Gaza. I mean, that was basically the quid pro quo that Israel put forward to the United States. And apparently Biden said yes. I mean, after having spent months and months and months telling Israel, you cannot invade Rafah without a plan to resettle, without having a plan for the refugees, to the 1 million+ refugees in Rafah, and there obviously is nowhere for them to go. So, in other words, you cannot invade Rafah because that will result in catastrophic loss of innocent life. Now, all of a sudden, Biden is reversing course on that because he doesn't want to let Israel start World War III. So it's just we're almost in a twilight zone, a very strange moment in history, where the options that Israel is presenting to the world are World War III or genocide, and somehow Biden is saying, okay, fine, you can just go with the genocide. Unbelievable.
Yeah. What else is interesting about that exchange is also it's timed with, I spoke to Sam Husseini, State Department correspondent, just in the last hour on this, but how it coincided with the UN Security Council vote on Palestinian statehood. Now, I do want to get your opinion on this two-state solution mantra that is very popular in Washington. I personally don't think there's a lot of credence in it anymore, but it's definitely a safe political position for a lot of people. But when it came to the vote in the UN Security Council, where did the veto come from on this? Again, United States vetoed. So do you think that was also a quid pro quo?
That is a very good question. I think the U.S. is bound to veto UN resolutions calling for ceasefires, calling for a Palestinian human rights, calling for a Palestinian state. I mean, this is nothing new. The U.S. has been doing this for decades. with regard to whether or not the United States actually supports a two-state solution, first of all, I think even that phrase two-state solution is a misnomer. It should be called a two-state facade, because the Palestinians have never been offered a state. Not in Camp David in 2000, not in Taba in 2001, and not in Annapolis in 2007 and 8. It's all been a facade. No document has ever been presented to any Palestinian leader offering them a state. It's all, every single negotiations has, first of all, been oral. And if you ask a lawyer, if I make a verbal offer to you, well, guess what? That's not a real offer. Have you ever signed a contract by just verbalizing the terms of the agreement? That's not how agreements work. That's not how offers work. And it's very obvious why all those offers were always verbal. Is because Israel didn't actually want to commit to offering Palestinians anything. They wanted the terms to always be vague. We are allowed to enter the West Bank in case of emergency. Well, as soon as you put it in writing, you have to define what an emergency means. And then as soon as you define emergency, it's obvious that you're not actually offering Palestinians real sovereignty. You're reserving the right for your military to enter that state whenever it so pleases, which means they don't have a state. It means they have some type of, civilian control, ultimately under Israeli security control, which is the nature of every single offer Israel has ever made to the Palestinians. It's, you can collect the trash, you can pave the roads, you can run your school system, you can even police the streets, but you don't get control over your borders, you don't get control over your airspace, you don't get control over your telecommunication networks. The things that you need to operate a state, to operate an independent state and have real sovereignty, Israel was never prepared to offer those things to the Palestinians. Not in 2000 and not in 2007 and 8, and not at any point since. And so I think that even to utter the phrase two-state solution, you're already doing a disservice, which is you're misrepresenting what the offer was, which is that it was never an actual offer. And so, look, and by the way, the United States has never actually supported the establishment of a Palestinian state. They've always supported these sort of cantonized Bantustans, ultimately subject to Israeli security. And even recently, there was a recording that leaked a few months ago. Wasn't a leak. It was Biden said this directly in a kind of an off the cuff response to a journalist. I think it was some kind of fundraising dinner where they asked, do you support a Palestinian state? And he said, yeah, I support it. It would be a demilitarized state or something to that effect. And it's like, well, but that's for the Palestinians to decide. So if you're telling the Palestinians, well, they can't have a military, well, then shouldn't the Palestinians be able to tell Israel, well, they can't have a military either? Like, either they have a state, which means they have the right to self-defense, or they don't. But this concept of, basically kneecapping the Palestinians, preventing them from actually, defending themselves, that has long been the position of the U.S. And by the way, interestingly enough, there was some reporting that came out, I believe, over the weekend. I don't know if this has been confirmed or verified, or but there was apparently some reporting that Hamas officials said, if you allow us to establish a Palestinian state on the 67 borders, we are willing to dismantle the Qassam brigades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is clear. That's been made clear on multiple occasions by Hamas themselves. But that's a point that's not very popular to mention in any sort of analysis or media coverage on this. I might add as well, control over your own water, control over your own power or electricity. The fact that Israel is going to take the gas concessions off the coast, the Marine 1 and 2 off the coast of Gaza, is a pretty clear indication that they do not respect or recognize any potential Palestinian entity or state in the future anyway. So they won't even let them have any resources or anything in their sort of maritime borders. So, I mean, that's pretty clear. So, but this move by Netanyahu to ramp up settlement production, is this not basically a reversal of the Sharon charade back in the early 2000s? And then what happened in the West Bank was basically a massive construction boom of illegal settlements right throughout the West Bank and the Jordan Valley, land grabs, home grabs, and everything like that. Is that do you think this is the plan for northern Gaza, for Gaza just in general?
I think the idea that Israel would construct settlements in the Gaza Strip is a fantasy and a fiction that is being said and deployed for the purposes of internal consumption. This is PR for the base. This is, you have, look, 60% of Jewish Israelis, when they were polled in January 2024, they 60% of Jewish Israelis said, we oppose allowing any humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. So 60% of Jewish Israelis support the mass murder of 2.3 million Palestinians. That is the base that we're talking about. And those are the people that support Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and Smotrich and Israel Katz and all the rest. And so when you're talking about a base that supports the total and complete annihilation of every single human being in the Gaza Strip right now, well, of course, in order to appeal to appeal to those people, you're going to talk about settlement construction. You're going to talk about this kind of thing. But the reality of the situation is that there will be no construction of settlements in the Gaza Strip. There are Palestinians now on their way back to North Gaza. They are, over the weekend, we saw the images, we saw the videos surfacing of not hundreds, but maybe not even thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Palestinians returning to their homes in the north. And now that there is some aid getting up there, and that the situation in the south is also unbearable, and people have nowhere to shelter. So I think this idea that you're going to build settlements, I mean, are you crazy? I mean, Hamas is active. Islamic Jihad is active in the north. These settlers have no hope. I mean, good luck trying to build an Israeli civilian presence in a region that is dominated by Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants. I mean, good luck. I can't imagine that working out well for you.
Yeah, and they're going to have problems getting home insurance coverage as well, I would imagine. But yeah, so and that leaves us with this issue of Gaza. Right now, what is the status? Let's take a break right now with TNT. When we come back, I want to know what the status is, Zachary, in Rafa, at the Rafa border crossing, with the amassing of so many refugees there that have been internally displaced, the threat of an invasion by the IDF that will be, by anyone's account, a massive bloodbath. I want to get your thoughts on that issue, and also want to talk about your project, Palestine Nexus, as well on the other side. I'm here with Dr. Zachary Foster. We're talking about the situation in the Middle East right now, this flashpoint that has the world looking upon it with such great interest. Why is this happening, and when will we see daylight in terms of a resolution on this? We'll talk about that on the other side. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. You're listening and watching TNT, Today's News Talk. We'll be
Military families often sacrifice precious time away from loved ones while serving our country. And for those with children, the separation can be especially difficult.
We were worried that with him leaving, that she would lose those connections with her dad.
Some of life's best moments happen between parents, children, and the pages of a good book. United Through Reading provides that connection.
You can watch your mom or dad read a book to you, and it almost feels like they're really there.
We ensure they remain a consistent, meaningful part of their children's lives, no matter the distance.
Just seeing Jacob recognize Daddy again after a long time just melted my heart.
And now, as we're facing greater isolation from our loved ones, United Through Reading is also available to veterans. Learn more about United Through Reading and download our free secure app at unitedthroughreading.org.
Patrick Henningsen talks on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. I want to welcome back onto the stage Dr. Zachary Foster. We're talking about right now the situation in Gaza specifically. I want to talk about the problem that's arising at the Rafa border crossing with you, Zachary, as well as your project, Palestine Nexus. But before that, one of the really important things in all this, and this is still an issue that we're still litigating in the public sphere, in the information sphere, in the media, on social media, is what really happened on October 7th. And, you know, people like Piers Morgan and some of these mainstream gatekeepers, they're absolutely sticking to this idea that there were beheadings and mass rape by Hamas on October 7th. And it seems like impossible to penetrate this propaganda wall on this. They're not budging, but so many people have done great work to debunk it and deconstruct it. Here's John Mearsheimer, the great international relations scholar from the University of Chicago, commenting on this very issue. We've got this clip. I want to get your reaction to it, Zachary, afterwards. Go ahead and roll this.
that. The Gray Zone is a very important alternative media outlet. And on the whole subject of the rape charge on October 7th, Israel and its supporters have maintained that there was systematic rape of Israelis on October 7th by Hamas and others who came into Israel from Gaza. And people who work for the Gray Zone, like Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, and then Mondo Weiss with Phil Weiss, and the Electronic Intifada with Ali Abu Niba, and a handful of other outlets have gone to great lengths to show that there is no evidence of systematic rape on October 7th, despite what Israel and its supporters say. So you actually have this real battle that takes place inside the United States regarding what happened with regard to the systematic rape charge on October 7th. You would not have that debate if there were no alternative media. If the mainstream media controlled the discourse about what happened on October 7th, there would be no reason to question whether there had been systematic rape on October 7th.
So what do you think about that? I mean, he's kind of quoted a few, independent media outlets there, Mondo Weiss, Gray Zone, Electronic Intifada. We've also debunked some of this at 21st Century Wire. The Cradle.co, this is another good Middle Eastern journal. What are your thoughts on that issue, Zachary?
He could have added to that list of sources, in addition to the Electronic Intifada, Mondo Weiss, Gray Zone, he could have also added the UN report that came out, was it a month or two ago, which found no clear and convincing evidence. And those are the exact words used in the report. There was three standards of evidence. There was, I forget, basically, 100% certain it happened, clear and convincing evidence it happened, and then there's a weaker threshold of evidence. I forget the exact wording on the weakest threshold, but they used the weakest threshold to describe acts of sexual violence that occurred on October 7th. They said there was clear and convincing evidence that there was sexual violence that took place after October 7th to the hostages once they were brought into Gaza and once they were abducted and in captivity. They claimed there was clear and convincing evidence of forced sexual violence. But on October 7th, during the attacks themselves, no clear and convincing evidence. Those are the words of the UN report, which, by the way, was a report that was allowed to be conducted under very, very narrow auspices. The report was they were only allowed to investigate sexual violence on October 7th. No, they were not allowed to investigate anything else. They were given the list of witnesses. It was basically a list of Israeli sources. They spoke to the Israeli Shin Bet officials. They spoke to the Israeli military, Israeli hospital officials. They were given the list of witnesses they could speak to. They were not allowed to pursue independent witnesses on their own. And that was their conclusion. So I think at this point that no serious person, when they look at the evidence, is claiming there was systematic rape that took place on October 7th. That claim has been debunked. I think that especially when you hear people like John Mearsheimer, who's, by the way, he's a political scientist, he's a realist, he's a mainstream American academic. This guy is by no stretch of the imagination some kind of radical Palestinian apologist by any stretch. And so I think and then, by the way, to the point around the importance of independent media, oh my gosh, I couldn't agree with him more on that. It's very, very obvious that the mainstream media just hook, line, and sinker spread the Israeli military propaganda from day one. Every single, so many major U.S. media outlets, all the cable programs, the New York Times, obviously, but even the Guardian, right? Even kind of lefty newspapers, they were all reporting out these claims that in the end were all debunked by the independent media experts who said, when you dig down deep, all of these reports, all the testimonies turned out to be false. You had the Israeli witness who changed his story 4 times. And then after the 5th time, it was reported in the New York Times as fact. And then you had the twin sisters that you couldn't even find the twin sisters, and was it Kibbutz Re'im? So all the anecdotes came out, and they were all proven to basically be propaganda, and that there actually was no hard evidence at all. There was no, there was no hard evidence whatsoever that even a single rape occurred on October 7th, let alone this being some kind of systematic, effort from the top. So it's. I think at this point the question is settled. According to the facts. Now, according to what the mainstream public believes, that's another question.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's the systematic rape story, those allegations, and there's the beheaded babies. But this kind of systematized sexual violence, this evokes the strongest possible emotions, and fear and hate and thirst for vengeance, quite frankly, among a population. So those are the two things I think that are important. Is that what Mearsheimer said? If there were no independent media, we wouldn't be having this debate about whether it was true or not. It would just be whatever the Guardian says, whatever the mainstream media says. And the other part is, without these stories, without these fabricated charges of beheaded babies, mass systematic rape, a pregnant woman that had her baby cut out and then the baby was shot in front of her. I don't know. There's all variations of this. Babies on clotheslines, babies in ovens, babies and sexual violence. So these two emotive concepts, these have to be the justification among the ranks of the IDF, among all soldiers, among Israeli society, to give their whole support for the government, for the Israeli military to do whatever they want in Gaza after October 7th. And all of these lies, without these lies, I really can't find, I find it implausible that they would be able to act in the way that they have, Israel I'm talking about, without these stories. And so this is amazing. So the question is, has there ever been a genocide in history that wasn't based on lies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're absolutely correct that it was pretty clear to the Israeli military that, especially by November, late November, early December, they had lost the war in public opinion, right? That clearly after 10, 15, 20,000 Palestinians had been massacred in Gaza, that even the people who supported Israel in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, most of them were now supporting the Palestinians and calling for a ceasefire. And so they needed to manufacture new reasons to get support for the ongoing genocidal war. And the way they did that was through this mass rape, kind of atrocity propaganda. And so the New York Times, a blockbuster piece came out December 26th, I think it was, after months and months of reporting. And then you had another report, then you had the UN report come out, which, the reporting on the UN report, I think, was incredibly misleading. Because you saw all these news outlets again say, mass rape, on October 7th, when in fact the report actually concluded the opposite, that there was no clear and convincing evidence that there was even a single rape, let alone mass rapes, on October 7th. So I think it was pretty clear to Israel that they needed to manufacture consent, and the way for the war, and the way they did that was through this atrocity propaganda. And I think the one other thing I would mention here is that, in the American South, in the aftermath of the Civil War, so basically from the end of the Civil War until World War II, the number one reason that white people provided for these lynchings against black people was not killing anybody, was not stealing anything. It was raping white women, because the white ex-slave owners, and their supporters in the KKK, what they knew was that there was one issue that would rile up white people and get them on board with these lynchings, and that was when a black person raped a white woman. That rape was enough to get anybody to support these kinds of lynchings. And I think that's not a coincidence, right? I think that there's somehow, for some reason, and there's been polling done on this as well, by the way. Frank Luntz, who is an American pollster, he did some polling. He does these, group. He brings in these groups of people and basically does messaging with them and gets them to say, which of these messages resonates with you most and it would get you to support Israel the most. And they list all these things, and guess what ranks the highest on Frank Luntz's polling data? It was rape. That is what people get. That is how to convince people to support Israel, is tell them that Hamas committed mass rape on October 7th, even more so than mass killings. And so I think the polling was clear. We have the historical data. We know this was clearly a strategy. And Israel used it for the purpose of manufacturing consent for a genocide.
Yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is a great book and a play about that very phenomenon that you're talking about. That's kind of usually enshrined in the American literary reading list there for schools. But those lessons, have we learned these lessons? It's debatable whether we have. We don't have to learn them again. Zachary, just got a couple of minutes left. Quickly, what do you think the danger is of an invasion of Rafa? And I want you to tell people about your amazing media project, Palestine Nexus. I'll give you the floor for the final minutes. Go ahead.
I think the first thing to say about this so-called invasion of Rafah is that Israel has been bombing Rafah on an ongoing basis for the past 6.5 months. Okay, there's reporting coming out every week. This house was bombed in Rafah. That tent was bombed in Rafah. So let's be very clear. Rafah has been under attack for many months now. But yes, as to whether or not Israel will invade Rafah, I'm very worried. I am very worried. I think that this Iran escalation didn't go as planned. I think Israel had hoped that they could distract the Israeli public with this Iran escalation, and it turns out it didn't work out. Iran didn't take the bait. They didn't kill any Israeli civilians. They didn't escalate in such a way that would give Israel justification to counterattack, and so then they were stuck, and so they can't. So the Iran front doesn't appear to be going the way they had hoped. So what's left for them? Well, there's only one place left in Gaza to attack, and that's Rafah. And the only thing we know about Netanyahu is the war has to go on, right? If the war ends, the Israeli public will hold him accountable for failing to protect Israel on October 7th, and then they will vote him out of office. 80% of Israelis want him out of office, and then once he's out of office, he will be tried for bribery, corruption, and breach of public trust. 3 charges that are on hold right now because you can't indict a sitting prime minister. But as soon as he's out of power, he will go back on trial, and most likely he will face jail time. In addition to facing all of these investigations that will inevitably come around his failure to protect the Israeli public on October 7th. So the only thing we know is that the war has to go on. And now we know it's probably not going to go on in Iran. So what's left? It's Rafah. So I'm very worried that there will be a full-out invasion. It's also possible Israel will continue these sort of low-level, one strike here, one strike there, all the while talking about we're going to invade Rafah and just sort of doing it piecemeal. And I think that's very consistent with the Israeli approach to occupation, to settlement expansion, to ethnic cleansing, to home demolitions, to destruction of olive groves. It's do it quietly, do it at night, do it when people aren't watching, do it because that you don't want to raise the ire. You want to get it done, but you're patient. You're willing for it to take months or years or decades. You're not in a rush to ethnically cleanse Palestinians or demolish their homes or commit genocide against them. You're perfectly happy to do it slowly. And that has been Israel's attitude for decades. So I think there's also a possibility that you just have this low-level, low-intensity, ongoing genocidal war, which is the alternative. So either those two possibilities, I think, are on the table. So then just to round out with, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead, Zach. Yeah, before we wrap up, go ahead. Tell us about your project, Palestine Nexus.
Yeah, so as far as Palestine Nexus goes, this is a media brand, a newsletter that I launched about 9 months ago, June, July, and we publish a weekly newsletter. We are publishing reports coming out of Gaza. We've published now 3 accounts from victims of the genocide, of their harrowing experiences, what they've witnessed, experiences of starvation and famine, bearing eyewitness to atrocities, seeing people executed in front of their eyes, just living in absolutely horrid conditions. So we're publishing those accounts, and if you're listening, and if you know folks in Gaza who want to write for Palestine Nexus, please send them our way. We also launched a course, so we're not just a media brand; we're also an educational operation. We launched a kind of a Palestine 101 course just this past week. So if you're interested in kind of getting a sort of a 4-hour summary of sort of the Israel-Palestine question from the 1870s to the present, you can sign up at PalestineNexus.com, and we would love your support.
I highly recommend people sign up, because I've heard you give this presentation as well on Twitter Spaces, and Zachary is an amazing historian. Support Palestine Nexus. Subscribe to the newsletter, folks. I do. It's definitely going to keep you in the loop on some important issues there. Dr. Zachary Foster, thank you for joining us on TNT this week.
Thanks so much for having me.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Again, PalestineNexus.com. That's his website. Subscribe to the newsletter. Big thank you to Sam Husseini, State Department correspondent in the first hour. And a big thank you to you, our viewers, our listeners. Thank you for tuning in this week on TNT Today's News Talk. We hope we informed you. We hope that we enlightened you, and maybe we entertained you a little bit. We don't mind if that happens. I appreciate all you guys. Hello to everybody in the TNT chat room. You guys have been amazing this week. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned, and all the best this weekend.